Flip-hand phones, Babylons can't crack the code.
Every year, hundreds of college athletes get drafted in the NFL draft, accomplishing their dreams of getting drafted to the NFL and hearing their name called on draft night. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about what happened to the past 10 Mr. Irrelevants. Now, if you do not know what Mr. Irrelevant is the name given to the final draft pick in the NFL draft. Now, before I continue on with the video, remember to smash that like button and subscribe, as we are on the road to 10K. Now, let's start the video. First up, from 2011, Cheta Ozougwu from Rice. Now, at Rice, he played there for 4 years, where he had 198 total tackles, 25 tackles for loss, 11 sacks, 5 pass deflections, 1 fumble recovery, and 4 forced fumbles as a defensive lineman. He was drafted as the last pick in the 7th round of the 2011 NFL Draft by the Houston Texans. Cheta lasted in the NFL from 2011 to 2015. For 2 seasons, he was on and off the active roster for the Chicago Bears in 2012 and 2013. He played in 9 games in his NFL career, where he had 1 forced fumble, 1 sack, and 8 total tackles, with 1 coming for a tackle for loss. Going into the 2015 season, he has not played since then because he failed a physical and ultimately has not been picked up since. In the 2012 NFL Draft, Mr. Irrelevant was quarterback from Northern Illinois, Chandler Harnish. He was selected in the 7th round by the Indianapolis Colts. In his college football career, he had a career pass completion percentage of 62%. He threw for 8,944 yards, 68 touchdowns, and 26 interceptions. On the ground, he averaged 5.5 yards per carry, while rushing for 2,983 yards in his career and 24 total touchdowns on the ground. Chandler Harnish, in his NFL career, would be on the practice squads of the Colts, Vikings, and Cardinals, and he ended his career with the Cardinals in 2015. In the 2013 draft, Mr. Irrelevant was tight end from South Carolina, Justice Cunningham. Now, Cunningham was selected by the Colts, and in his career at South Carolina as a tight end, he had 50 receptions for 581 yards, averaging 12 yards per reception and 1 touchdown. In his NFL career, he was primarily a practice squad player with the Colts and the Rams. He did play in 4 games during his NFL career, where he had 1 target for 1 reception and 4 yards. Those were the only stats that he recorded in those 4 games in his career. He was cut by the Rams going into the 2016 season, and he has not been in the NFL since. Next up, in 2014, we have defensive back out of Memphis, Lonnie Ballentine, who was taken by the Texans. Now, Lonnie Ballentine, in his 4-year career at Memphis, had 176 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, half of a sack, 3 interceptions, 8 pass deflections, and 1 fumble recovery in his career as a Tiger. Lonnie Ballentine would be with the Texans his entire career, as he played in 4 games while he was there. He had 3 total tackles that were all solo and 1 pass deflection in 4 games. Near his end of his tenure as a Texan, he was suffering some injury issues that had him on the injury reserve list, and ultimately, going into the 2017 season, after being placed on the injury reserve list, he was waived. In 2015, Mr. Irrelevant was tight end from Louisville, Gerald Christian. Now, Gerald started his college football career off at Florida, where he was a backup tight end. Then he eventually transferred to Louisville, where he did most of his damage. In his college football career, he had 64 receptions for 882 yards, averaging 14 yards per reception, and 10 total touchdowns through the air. In the 2015 NFL Draft, he was taken by the Arizona Cardinals. Gerald Christian played with the Buffalo Bills and Arizona Cardinals in his career from 2015 to 2017, primarily as a practice squad member, but he did play in 3 games in 2016 with the Bills, where he had 1 reception for 14 yards. After he was released before the 2017 season, he last played in the AAF with the Arizona Hotshots. In 2016, Mr. Irrelevant was Kalen Reed, defensive back from Southern Miss. He was selected by the Tennessee Titans. In his career at Southern Miss, he was a very good player, as he had 152 career total tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 8 total interceptions in his career, 3 of them being brought back as touchdowns, 3 fumble recoveries, and 3 forced fumbles. In Kalen Reed's NFL career, He has played with the Tennessee Titans and Seattle Seahawks, primarily being a special teams player, but he has played in 7 games in his career, both with the Tennessee Titans, where he had 1 pass deflection and 3 total tackles. Reed with the Seahawks in 2019 suffered a very bad neck injury that could likely be a career-ending injury, and he did not receive a restricted free agent tender from the team after the season, and he became a free agent in 2020. In the 2017 NFL Draft, Mr. Irrelevant was quarterback from Ole Miss, Chad Kelly. Now, Chad Kelly was selected by the Broncos, and in his college football career, he completed 64% of his passes, threw for 6,858 yards, 50 touchdowns, and 21 interceptions. On the ground, he rushed for almost 1,000 yards, averaging 5 yards per carry, and 16 total touchdowns on the ground. Now, Chad Kelly was a pretty good college football quarterback at Ole Miss, especially in his junior season, where he threw for over 4,000 yards and had 31 touchdowns through the air. In 2016, as a senior, he did have a bit of a down season compared to last, and it did not help his draft stock, ending the year on a torn ACL. Chad with the Broncos was actually seen as someone that could potentially become the starting quarterback one day. Unfortunately, this was not the case at all, as he was released in the middle of the 2018 season after trespassing into someone's home after Von Miller's Halloween party. Chad's next move would be with the Indianapolis Colts for the 2019 NFL season, where he was actually suspended the first 2 games of that season for violating the NFL's personal conduct policy. After being reinstated, he was actually waived and re-signed to the practice squad the next day. He would be activated to the active roster at the end of the 2019 season. Going into 2020, he was released, then signed to the practice squad, then released again on September 30th, and he's currently an NFL free agent. In 2018, Mr. Irrelevant was Trey Quinn, wide receiver out of SMU, and he was selected by the Washington football team. Now, Trey Quinn was primarily a backup wide receiver at LSU for the most part of his career, and he only played 1 season as a starting receiver, but in that season, he had a very good year with SMU as a redshirt junior, where he played in 13 games. He had 1,236 yards, averaging 11 yards per reception, and 13 total touchdowns through the air. He would declare his name for the 2018 NFL Draft, where he was obviously Mr. Irrelevant. Trey Quinn honestly got off to a pretty good start to start off his career in Washington, but injuries have been his downfall. He's had a good career so far for someone that was the last pick in his draft, but he's spent a lot of his time on the injury reserve list for both Washington and Jacksonville, and he's currently with the Las Vegas Raiders. In his career so far, he has 35 receptions for 273 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. Now on to 2019 with tight end from UCLA, Caleb Wilson, and he was selected by the Arizona Cardinals as Mr. Irrelevant. Now in Caleb Wilson's career at UCLA, he was there for 3 years, where he had 114 receptions for 1,675 yards, averaging 15 yards per reception and 5 touchdowns. So far in Caleb Wilson's NFL career, he has been with the Cardinals on their practice squad, the Redskins, and the Eagles' active roster and practice squad. In his NFL career so far, he has played in 5 games in 2020, all with the Philadelphia Eagles. The final guy that I'm going to be talking about in today's video, from the 2020 NFL Draft, Mr. Irrelevant, Georgia linebacker Tae Crowder. Now, Tae Crowder at Georgia had 122 total tackles in his career, 10 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, 2 interceptions, 5 pass deflections, 2 fumble recoveries, and 1 forced fumble. As a rookie in 2020, Tae Crowder blew away everyone's expectations, especially as the last pick of the 2020 NFL Draft, and he might have had the best season as a guy who is labeled as Mr. Irrelevant. He played in 11 games in 2020, starting in 6 of them, where he had 57 total tackles, 34 of them being solo, 3 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 1 touchdown, 1 fumble recovery, and 1 pass deflection. Well guys, if you made it this far in the video, remember to smash that like button, turn on them post notifications, and subscribe for more videos. B. Kelly out.